Good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Lynn
and Dr. Sam.
Welcome to the Wild and Precious Optimal Living Radio Show. And this show is about really reminding you health is a choice, not by chance. You have this one wildly intelligent and precious body that dictates the quality of your life. And on this show, we have candid conversations about how to regain health if you've lost it along the way. And together, we discover the many facets of health and healing. This show is for parents who are tired of being stuck, tired of being sick, and you want to be able to take control of your health for yourselves and to help your kids as well. So, really excited to be able to have on the show Dr. Lowell Whiteman today. And before we get started, we want to be able to just kind of make a couple of announcements too. This show is sponsored by NeuroSolutions, and can't wait to be able to share with you a little bit more about what NeuroSolutions does and the effect that it has for us as we utilize their lasers at home and at practice. And today, you know, we are creating taking a different approach for between now and June. Is each month we have a different theme, and we're super excited because pain is a big topic, and we think about, when we hear pain, you may think about physical pain immediately, or you may think about mental emotional pain. Just this morning, we were getting ready to actually go camping. We're going to go camping for the weekend, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so obviously, you know, you want to prep for food and everything. And I was slicing a pineapple with a butcher knife, and as I was doing so, I angled the butcher knife just at the right angle to just slice just the top part of my skin. But it was not deep enough, because immediately I sensed that signal to feel that pain, obviously, and that stopped me to just pull back, right? And what a beautiful mechanism this is, because just in a matter of seconds before I can even consciously perceive actually feeling pain, or perceive that what I'm doing, my body's already sensing that, my brain's already processing that, and all the right movements and the right orchestration for me to be able to respond to that reflex of withdrawing the butcher knife and stop cutting myself, right? And so, because we would be in the hospital right now and we would not be able to have this show. So with that said, the intelligence of the body, intelligence of what pain exists for, is to create a defense mechanism for ourselves to make a change immediately. And we're super excited to be able to have Dr. Lowell. He is a coach. I guess people call you Coach. Mm-hmm. Coach Whiteman as well too, Coach Lowell. So he is a performance coach. He works with elite athletes, and he is also the host of our next radio show coming up here in KUHS Denver, and which is 360 Mindset. Mm-hmm. And then you also have a podcast too on Spotify.
Yeah, we take the show and we package it up and push it off to other platforms.
That's fantastic. Good stuff. Yeah. So I want, this is an opportunity for Sam and me to be able to get to know you too. So please do share more about yourself. And
well, the topic for today is one that's in my wheelhouse almost every day.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of who I serve and take care of. Mm-hmm. And in my business, it starts with the brain first, mm-hmm. and then goes to whatever that signals the body to do. Mm-hmm. Regretfully, that's flipped over sometimes with the general managers, the coaches, the athletes themselves. Many times they don't think about their brain health before they think about their body health. Mm-hmm. And yet when they have the injury or the pain from those injuries, they wind up understanding how important and relevant the brain is. Right. So in my world, I study cognitive behavior, and cognitive behavior to how it motivates and stimulates certain body responses. Mm. So when I hear the word pain, it's a 30,000-foot word. Uh-huh. And there's lots of different words that go down below that. So I want to have a discussion about what is inflammation, and is that pain? Mm-hmm. A bruise is pain to some, and just a kind of a brush it off kind of feeling. Right. But it all has the same rudimentary neurological response. Like you said with your example with the knife, you knew based on the action something was going to happen, even before the pain registered in your brain. Right. You cognitively knew that motion was going someplace. I didn't want it to go. Right. And that for some people on their sensitivity levels will go, oh my gosh, and they'll have a sense of discomfort and pain. Even before the neurological response gets stimulated, because the knife hit nerves and went deep enough to get nerves. Right. So that whole process is what I get into.
Okay.
I identify all of those parts. Now, I've been an athlete up to the college level, so I relate to them from my own pain. As you said earlier, Sam, I tore my rotator cuff, so I've gone through my cascade of different levels of pain and discomfort. And I want to share some examples of that with you today as well.
Please do.
But it's, for me, it's hard for me to talk about myself.
Yeah.
So to answer your question directly, I have my PhD, I have my master's in education, so I come at my practice from an educational foundation rather than the pure theory of sports psychology or the pure theory of industrial and behavioral psych, which all three are part of what I do. So I study that very aggressively. I've also got a bachelor's in, I'm kind of a geek, a bachelor's in finance and accounting, so the business side's covered, but I have, in some colleges, I have a minor in chemistry and organic, or in biology. So I study the body from tip to toe, and greatly appreciate what you guys do from a structural, skeletal standpoint and what its impact is on the body's response to all kinds of stimulus, because as you know, alignment, posture, all of that is critical to be able to not only just go through life in a very high functioning way,
Right.
but in many cases a pain-free way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, hypercritical in all those things. I mean, in terms of looking at the neurological aspect through, like you said, through posture and even down to how these neurons fire up into the brain and the body. I mean, for our audience, really simply, we're talking about pain. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's entire clinics and practices built on pain management, whether it's from a neuropathy perspective to chronic pain perspective to chemical exposures. I mean, the whole gamut runs in this entire industry. For our conversation today, we can go a lot of different routes. We can talk about chronic pain. We can talk about that inflammation cascade. We can talk about what I think probably is more in your wheelhouse too, of that breaking down the no pain, no gain mantra.
That's a tough one to fight. But it still exists. My dad my dad was a coach. Wasn't the most socially conscious coaches of the world, but that was part of the era that he lived in and grew up in. So pain was not something you accepted readily. Crying was not something you accepted readily. So pain usually leads to crying and discomfort of some sort. So those mantras, those verbal cues are going away. But I have to say, make sure that we keep aware of what that means to the athlete, to the child, to the human being, because your awareness to pain, your awareness to the condition of what that pain is doing to your body is where we really need to land. So even though I don't agree with what my dad said to me, I learned a lot from that. It caused me as a kid to be conscientious of where I was at, what I was doing when pain was created. And what I've learned over the years is breathing is hugely important to the pain management process, as well as the awareness through that breathing process of where are you structurally positioned. So for example, I have therapy lying on a bed to push my arm around, my shoulder around, and I have to know what that posture means. So for example, if the pillow is not pushed to the side, range of motion in my left arm isn't where it should be for the therapy. So I can't have the pillow all the way under my head. So the conversation I have between myself and my therapist is that comfortable? Can I get the range of motion I need? And now I'm going into a lot more detail than you would normally go through when you're thinking about it, but your awareness of where your body is and the breathing process you apply to that when the pain is inflicted. In this case, it is purposefully inflicted on me, so that I can understand where is the crescendo of that pain. And that's when I want to breathe up to and through that, knowing where it's happening in my shoulder. But then as that happens, I can adjust my neck and body so that as she's doing that, I'm getting full range of motion through that rotator cuff element. And I'm you can relate to this as a female and as a mom. The panting, the breathing through pregnancy and those pains.
Absolutely.
So I'm doing the he ha ha during that's about as close as we guys can get to that particular experience that you've had, Lynn. But the breathing techniques are beneficial to making sure that you're in that right place, and the exchange of what you're doing is online, so that you might not need any drugs.
Right.
So that's the other part for me is I try to get my athletes off of or diminished in the dosage of the medications. You know, opioids are a typical common solution chemically. Cannabinoids are also part of that, but inflammation is the key for me. I think all pain starts with inflammation, then it escalates to a degree that we then call pain. So making sure that we're, you know, using the vocabulary that fits is what's important to me.
Yeah. Well, Sam is definitely more of the neurological and the geeky mind of understanding that. And for me, what comes to mind is when we're trying to understand pain, and like what you, even just how you were expressing, like, you know, the having to vocalize that pain, letting that out, being expressed. I believe that there's the science behind vocalization and letting pain, and how much, even from the mental emotional perspective, and when we're experiencing pain, of rather than holding it in, letting yourself breathe through and express through, and actually acknowledging that there.
That's a good word, acknowledging it.
Yeah. And even just, you know, like you were just saying, even just being able to position yourself, even changing those little behavioral things that allow you to work around and be with that pain. That's a different mindset too, I think, behind.
Well, and for the therapist, and you're mentioning both of you have therapeutic backgrounds and are involved in interacting with patients. So your conscious understanding of the techniques of breathing, but the posturing through that breathing helps you to make sure you get them into that space. Because I've been with a lot of PT folks that are muscle and skeletal manipulations and massages, and they don't get it. They're going through a check the box. Okay, here's where the scap is, here's where the inferior is, here's where, and then they go through the language, but they're not listening or feeling that patient and what they're doing, or even understanding the sound of the breathing, and is it peaking at the pain? And because if they're inflicting it, they know when they push too far. And getting that. So I'd be interested in knowing your guys' thoughts about the incident of pain that you can actually create in a controlled way, and then there's the ones that are the incident. You know, somebody punches you. You know, you get hit as a football player, and you know right then and there what's going on, and how do you get them through that incident of pain?
Well, I mean, first off, I immediately think like, just to kind of recap some of the things we're talking about and kind of what's going on. So I mean, pain, first of all, let's keep it real simple for the neurological understanding of it for our audience. So when I think about it, okay, you have basically two fibers that are firing up into the spinal cord. You've got your big thick fibers, you've got your real thin fibers. Those real thin fibers primarily are what conduct pain up into the spinal cord. The real thick ones are what conduct movement, things like that. When you have an injury, those smaller fibers fire up into the brain. You also get that whole inflammation cascade as well, right? The cytokines and everything else that are going on, and hopefully you have enough enzymes in the body to then be able to lyse those away later on when it's no longer needed, to turn it into chronic inflammation. But all that's happening at the same time. And with the breathing aspect, I think what's really going on there is you're firing, one, the vagus nerve, but two, the frontal lobes, to then dampen a lot of that pain response, which is why it's like, all right, how metabolically stable is somebody? As you ask the question, like, all right, how do I know how far I can push somebody? Well, how healthy is their brain? How healthy are their frontal lobes to be able to dampen that whole stress response, or that whole pain response, to push through, to get more healing, to increase their resilience, to then, hey, they can go out and then suffer more on the football field the next time, right? Or on the ski slope, or wherever else they may be.
Or get paid.
Or get paid, which is really what it's all about.
Because in my world, there's phrases like next man up, which in behind the scenes of that statement, there's some pain management there.
Yes.
How well did you manage the pain between possessions? If it's a football example, you know, offense is on, defense is off. So if you're a defender that just got dinged, you know, you want to be the next man up.
Absolutely.
So you're managing pain off field between the series. In basketball, other sports, you don't have that luxury. And maybe the referee will stop things. But and I'm bringing this up because of what you said about the degree of pain that you can manage. And there's always a chemical response.
Always.
And I'm always curious about the organization's capability of measuring one's chemistry, the enzymes, the acids that are cleansing. You know, we talk about the phrase cleansing breath, you know, because that's where you get at the peak of the pain, cleanse it through, and then release it back out until the next wave of pain comes. But there's also that perfunctory, preparatory measurement of chemistry. So are we measuring the enzymes in the athlete, having a file of that so I know what you can tolerate, or at least give a better than just guess onto the tolerance. Lactic acid has now come into my world beyond muscle, and why that's important. So fluid has become a big part of the management process for me with my athletes, so that I understand if they're not hydrating enough, their irritations become painful. You know, it's not just here's an example of irritation. Soccer players, football players, soccer players, and baseball players on AstroTurf. They get a raspberry, right?
Yep.
So that's an irritation, and for a moment that could be somewhat painful. But if you have a player who has enzyme levels that are different than someone else, that's serious. The inflammation will become larger and more irritated and red. So when I see that stuff in the dugouts, I've actually gone to a head coach and said he needs to get something. He needs to get the arm treated. Well, why is it? It's just a raspberry. It's just a little rash. And I'll say no. That's going to be problematic in another couple of innings, and he's going to want to come out because he's going to get stiffness in his arm. And I had no measure of the enzymes. I just know from the experience. He's different than that one over there, that if he would have gotten the raspberry in his arm, he would have continued to play without hesitation. Well, those are dilemmas for me about pain management, because the mindset is not mindful enough of those differences. So practitioners, if we start measuring the enzymes, giving real, solid, factual proof of these differences, players will play better. They'll have greater understanding. The organizations will know about how to invest their money properly. So there's a whole cascade of things from what we do that people are not as aware of what they should be.
Right. Well, I mean, even on a general level, I mean, most people, when they go to a functional practitioner, whether it's someone like us, a functional neurologist, or a functional medicine practitioner, they're usually going to start with looking at inflammation in the blood. Right? We're going to take inflammation levels. I think it'd be interesting, what if professional athletes at the beginning of a season, and maybe at the beginning of an off season, what if they did inflammation level measurements to see where somebody's at?
There is one that's going on because it's a genetic thing with certain ethnic groups. Black athletes have a preponderance for sickle cell anemia, and that's an immune issue, but it's also in lesser degrees an inflammation of sorts, and is personified when they get to higher elevations. Like in Colorado, there are players, African American players, that will not be allowed to play because they're at jeopardy. I mean, life-threatening jeopardy if they were to exert themselves at those high altitudes with a sickle cell trait in their blood. We should extend that, to your point. Go to other inflammatory conditions, because if an athlete gets a contusion that results in soft tissue damage or a break of a bone, and we don't have the data to know how to really formally treat that pain because we didn't do the enzyme testing, we may be doing something that's not in line with their health and well-being going forward. I have athletes that have successfully had lawsuits against franchises because the franchise took a course of action in managing the pain, managing the injury that was detrimental. And if they would have had the data, they may have stopped and taken a different course to manage that athlete's health in a better, more timely fashion, and being able to get them onto the field. Now that's the professional level. When we get down to moms and dads at the community level, with not as, well, some parents are a little bit more aggressive than others.
Very true.
They get excited about their young amateur. But the same kind of thinking about pain can be brought down into that community level from the point we're making about irritations and inflammations. In fact, kids handle pain way better than adults because they don't have the same amount of stimulation. They've not experienced life to a level where they've been overly filtered. And because the adult goes, I had that on my knee, I did it again, and all of a sudden their brain escalates the feeling of the pain in that joint because it happened to them before. Rather than just saying, oh no, hold on, breathe a minute, wait till the doctor gets here, let's examine it. So moms and dads come to me with their young, superstar, the Michael Jordans of the world, and they say, well, what can I do to toughen them up? I said, well, let them fall and don't pick them up too quickly. Let them experience what that feeling is, and then obviously if you see blood and those kind of things, you want to get a little bit more excited. But the brain has to understand it. They don't have the understanding yet of what that means.
Right.
So brain chemistry is a big part of what I do,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at that. I'm advocating for a lot of my associates in the medical field to begin to test, and they can, especially at the pro level.
Mm-hmm.
There's not restrictions on asking the patient for permission,
Yeah.
because they're they're an asset of the team.
Interesting.
So they can do a profile of things. I give the NBA a big pat on the back for what they did during last year's finals, because they created a bubble that literally was an ecosystem that was standardized for the teams, and they have very little pushback on the health side of COVID, which is an inflammatory issue and has its fair share of neurological pain outcomes. So when you really fully think about things in an organized, structural way, we get to some really powerful solutions.
Yeah.
We're just not doing enough of it.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering too, so it sounds like you work with a pretty diverse age group.
Oh, yeah.
From kids
Yeah.
to pro athletes
Yeah.
and their adults. And you know, it's really interesting in what you were just saying in terms of how kids, they're so much more resilient, I guess, in how they respond to pain versus adults, and how with adults we have these preconceived notions because we have a history of memory of it.
Yeah.
And you know, it kind of ties into, there's this objective way of looking at it where you were talking about enzymes and maybe dietary levels and lifestyle choices, not even just for athletes but just for everyday us.
Yeah.
Not normal, but like more regular, everyday.
Us average humans.
That's the word, average
Yes.
humans, right?
Yeah.
we are all special in our own way.
Right.
So, but so there's that lifestyle measurable aspect and biological aspect that we can measure as practitioners. Then there's the mindset behind the personal experiences, the upbringing, even no pain, no gain, and how that can really shift the biochemistry in the system too, with pain, and how that can really influence. So even
absolutely.
the subjective perception of pain can really influence the actual biological physiology of what's happening.
Well, we've got, look, the examples in Hollywood are, they have the 911 shows are out, right? And they have the extraordinary writing where a person runs up to a firing car and they pull off the door and their hands are charred up because of the fire, and in the scene there's no response to pain, right?
Right.
Because some other part of their chemistry in their brain and body overtook the pain receptors and closed it down. What that basically says is we all have opioids in our body, natural opioids.
Yeah.
We all have natural cannabinoids in our body, as well as other, chemistry that I won't go into because it has nothing to do with pain.
Right.
But when we can tap into those chemistries, whether it's through emergencies or, I believe that we can cognitively process ourselves into a practice state of drawing on those when needed. Because we do it anyway in an extreme situation. So if we were mindful enough to start tapping into that and practicing how to do that, we would be able to manage pain, inflammation, or an irritation of any kind, both real and imagined. And have a fuller, more complete direction in our living. And ultimately what I do is to get my athletes to a place where they're better human beings, not just better athletes.
Yeah.
And part of that is them understanding all the connective parts of their body. One of my quotes I use a lot, or not quotes, stories I use a lot, is with Michael Johnson, and he's a 5-time gold medalist in track and field. Yep. He's a trainer and coach down in Texas, where he has his own place that he trains athletes, both ones who aspire to be professionals as well as just the amateurs. And the thing about him that I emphasize constantly is process, process, process. So if we want to take our body and our mind into a place that manages, in this case, today's topic of pain, we've got to have a process to do that.
Right.
And have a channel of the layers, like putting in another piece of magnetic deck into your computer and saying, okay, this one's on pain management. I want to focus on the processes for pain management today. And one of those first steps is the breathing process, and then how do I manage the chemistry of that process? So for drugs, for example, are a big, quick check for a lot of trainers, regretfully. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie North Dallas 40. It's an old movie about the 70s in football, when they had pharmacology in the locker room.
Wow.
Wow.
It was, oh gosh, I mean, every kind of pill, you know, because that was back in the day, free love, marijuana, LSD, I mean, it was all kind of out there experimenting.
Yeah.
So these guys are getting injected at halftime. It caused football, and the realities, it was based on a real series of situations for football players, caused the league to start managing that error of pharmacology and raise the consciousness of trainers about mind-body connection as it relates to pain or recovery from an injury, the surgery.
Right.
So for me, I realized that now and I asked for it, and this is a side story, the surgeon I went to is the surgeon I refer athletes to. I was the first of my own referral. Yeah. Going there. So he gave me this nerve block pump, which is it's not like a chemical, an addictive chemical. It's basically a chemical that blocks the nerve site. So if my nerves start to fire off because it's irritated and painful, this pump starts to pump stuff. I also had a button I could push more if I wanted. I didn't do that often. Yes, I did.
Only weekends.
Yeah. So there is change coming, but regretfully, it's at the highest level. It hasn't trickled its way down into our communities, other than what we're doing here, informing people about, hey, there are other alternatives.
Right.
Encourage your kids to think through their pain, breathe through their pain. The other thing I'll give to moms and dads is, when you have a child that you've picked them up off the ground, they're sniffling, the tears are flying, and they're still kind of, you know, that sound they make when they're trying to manage the pain, is get eye contact with them. Ask them, look in my eyes, look in my eyes. Now that's a technique I learned with dealing with autistic kids and high profile kids that are pretty good athletes as well, but get them to engage with you so that that's the first step for them to start controlling the nerve impulses themselves. Beyond that, you just examine the injury and go from there.
So how is the engagement controlling the nerve impulse specifically?
Well, what happens is, and anybody that's working with traumatic brain injury patients, there are what look like AV goggles that do eye movement patterns. So they can, when you have that technology, you can track eye movement patterns, these dots, and know, it's the lollipop. You want the lollipop on basically it's a big center of nerve impulse here, and then a stem down the middle means you're okay.
Yeah.
If it was all scattered around in the spider web, that means your eyes are not tracking in the motion that it needs to. So when you do this this is our very simplistic way, right?
Right.
I'll move my eyes around and see if you say, look at my eyes, and you follow my eye movements and where I'm going, then I know you're okay. Or doctors will do this.
Right.
If you've got a concussed. Now what I'll do is I'll grab one hand with them for a concussion, and I'll say, squeeze my hand, and then I'll say, watch my finger. What happens is they can't squeeze my hand if they can't watch my finger. Or if they can squeeze my hand, they're not watching my finger.
Right.
So I got an imbalance there. So these are techniques that I got into my practice so that I can quickly, with authority and confidence, say to a PT, the physical therapist on the sidelines, take this kid out. This kid needs to come out. You know, they're not vomiting. Well, if they're vomiting, we got a bad. It's worse.
Exactly.
Right.
And I've had coaches over the years where I've had to really say to them, pull that kid out. And only on one occasion in over 20 years did I actually go to the parents in the stands and say, get down here and advocate for your kid. And get this coach to get that kid out of there.
Right.
And that's back a few years. We've changed, thankfully.
Thankfully so.
But brain injury is a pain center that I work on quite a bit. Injury recovery, managing the injury if it doesn't go to surgery, are also incidences of pain where I get involved in pain management. But anyway.
Yeah. Are you mostly there for games when you're watching? Are you really there? Like, how are you coaching them along the way outside, like before games?
Yeah, it's depends on the franchise.
Yeah.
And whether I can get on the sideline in the field. If that's typically not the norm. If I'm connected with the franchise and players, that's when they let me go on the field.
Yeah.
So off the field, it's a one-on-one. So I'll have weekly therapy sessions with them about their mindset. Every athlete has to go through a cognitive assessment program that I've created with a colleague of mine. And he spent 30 years gathering empirical data about the assessment. It's called an RMP. And basically what I do is that assessment allows me catch up with them really, really quickly. I don't have to spend years and weeks figure out who are you, what do you do, why do you do it that way?
Why do you exist?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, we look at 16 different factors to understand who they are, so I can quickly get into their centers of desire and be able to hone in on the buttons that need to be pushed. So I know, look, I've got guys that are just, and guys and gals that are just babies when it comes to pain. I mean, I could go like that, and they go, "Oh my God, that hurts! Don't do that." And so, the assessment helps me understand that's who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
They can't lie to me because the football player's got a big dog. You know, I'm 6'5", 300 pounds.
Sure.
I'm tough.
Tough guy. Yeah.
And yet, they'll be in the movie theater crying their eyes out at some kind of cartoon. You know, that's passive example. I don't mean it literally.
Usually it's a Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, yeah. But we want to understand where does an individual land in their mind on these topics that are integral for them being their best, and then looking for support from other resources to shore up what they need for themselves. And that's really difficult. In the pain game, for me, is getting an athlete, and this usually comes up with injuries, is because, look, I've got 7 Kevlar anchors in my shoulder, which typically is 4. Athletes, when they get to the point where I'm at now, I'm halfway into my 6-month recovery, they start feeling really good.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hey, all right.
But if they lift something at the wrong place, that Kevlar becomes like a razor knife in there, because Kevlar is pretty tough stuff.
Yeah.
And will just trash the living daylights out of that wound. So it's important for people to understand, coming back to the point we made earlier about body connection, mind connection, so that with the technology that we get that helps us, we keep it in proper perspective of slow down, take a breath, you got a few more weeks to go, you don't need to push it. Or the other side is, what are you, being a baby?
Yeah.
Get up, go, let's go.
Yeah.
You're done. So there's the degrees of tolerance and pain impacts recovery time, impacts going too fast in recovery time. So it's a really, I love the puzzles. So for me, this is puzzles that I love to put together.
Awesome. I want to pause the conversation for just a second and acknowledge our show sponsor, NeuroSolutions. So through this conversation, we've talked a lot about the chemical applications of pain, but haven't talked too much about the electrical applications of it. And this is really where NeuroSolutions can shine in both a professional setting and a personal setting. So NeuroSolutions is a laser company, and in our opinion, the best laser company out there, because as any tool is used, the knowledge behind it is just as important, if not more important, in its application. And when it comes to laser therapy, this is stuff that is cutting edge. This is stuff that is really starting to take over a lot of aspects in the medical industry. We use lasers a lot for eye surgeries and for overall body surgeries, but now it's really being applied to pain, as well as to, in our office a lot, also neurological improvements. And when it comes to pain, especially in chronic pain, voltage is a really big issue that's not being talked about in terms of the cellular level and really what the health of the voltage is in the cells. So if you are a person who is struggling with pain, or if you're a practitioner looking to try and solve this pain puzzle, as Dr. Lowell has said, NeuroSolutions is the company to reach out to. So check them at neuro-solutions.com or email info@neuro-solution.com. So I want to pick the conversation back up and kind of talk about that. Hey, where is it prudent to pause and say, hey, all right, we've pushed too far, and hey, how do I know I need to push more?
It's a great segue because of the mechanical side you mentioned with your sponsor.
Yeah.
There's another smaller device that's used in a neurological sense called a TENS unit.
Yes.
So I'll use it as an example. It's basically you put what looks like you're in a 911 TV show, and you're putting electrodes on the body part that needs to be stimulated. Let's take an ankle, for example. You're going to put these little probes on the ankle, and then you're going to have a little meter that those wires are hooked to, and you're going to have a dial. Diabolical dial. And turn that sucker up. So we'll know with some certainty, hopefully, the response of the person you have those probes on when it gets too high. They're going to go, that's too high. and literally their ankle will shake. You'll see muscle tremors.
Spasm.
Yeah, because the electrical impulse is a little too high. Now, in some cases, you turn it down to a point where they can tolerate it, so you can stimulate the muscle and the corresponding circulation with that stimulation to bring blood, which is healing juice, to the area. All right. So another way of doing this is a amped up TENS unit to be able to measure, okay, if through motion, can you tolerate the stimulation? So we put, like, if I wanted to do squats with somebody, and they get up out of a chair, they sit down in the chair, they get up out of the chair. So I use a unit to stimulate the muscles into contractions. So like they're really squeezing their muscles. Well, I'm squeezing their muscles. They aren't necessarily. Right. Can they fight through that to get to this point? Now that's a counterintuitive way of training. But electrostimulation and on the nerves is a new way of using pain as a guide to tolerance. So I know what the peak level is that they can push up to. And so when I turn that off, take off all the monitors, I go say, go lift weights, go back to the physical strength and conditioning coach and start lifting weights, and then come back after that session and see if by opening up what we did is allowing more muscle tissue to be created. Because muscle tissue doesn't get, this is really strange to say this way, but muscle tissue grows because you break muscle down.
Exactly.
Right.
And because you broke it down, blood rushes in there.
Right.
Well, how can I do that in a controlled fashion? Electrostimulation does that. Now, on the other side of that, what you mentioned, which is the repair side of things, how do I know how badly you need the repair if I don't measure how high up I need to go to see what the repair level is? So the same thing is true with that regard as well. So I evaluate with the help of physical therapists, orthopedic physicians, and strength and conditioning coaches, and I have them all in the room at the same time, because historically they're never in the room at the same time.
Very true.
It's their own little world. My side, get out of here, stay out of my silo.
Yep.
And I say, no, break that down, because we're here for that person.
Right.
That person needs to have us all understanding what did the strength and conditioning coach, and how does that influence what the PT is going to do and how they wrap your ankle. Because if you fracture that ankle and now you're off of that and you've been cleared by the orthopedic to go lift and do toe lifts and bench presses and, wait a minute, bench press would involve the foot, would it? Okay, squats.
There we go.
We need to have that connection so that the message is clearly understood in reinforcing the real connection, which is the neurological to the muscle to the circulation, so that it all runs and flows properly. So that's my way of dumbing it down.
Yeah, well, for you, just saying that, how necessary is that even for everyday, once again, our average Joe person, us here who, we see so many different practitioners, and in our office we have so many patients that have different practitioners that they see, and how necessary it is to really just keep in mind that if you have different practitioners who are supporting you in your health, it's so necessary to make sure that everybody's in communication. If obviously not all practitioners can be in the same room at the same time, but just being able to make sure that everybody gets to communicate. I think this is a really important component as a health practitioner, is to say what type of care are you receiving with this person, and sometimes it can be counterproductive, and sometimes there may be too many cooks in the kitchen.
Too often.
Yes.
Way too often.
And so
we have technology. You guys use technology, but what bothers me is the technology is not used in a way to connect all the players you just talked about.
Right.
So when moms and dads take in Jill or Johnny into the orthopedics to get an evaluation because somebody headed a soccer ball or somebody got kicked in the knee during a football game or whatever, and they go in there, they should be wondering, how do I maintain the connection for my kid? So if the orthopedic reviews and says, yep, your child needs surgery, but I'm not the one that's going to do it. So-and-so needs to do it. And then after the surgery, I recommend that you go to this physical therapy place. Well, why is that? And how are they going to communicate with me what's going on? How should I manage Johnny or Jill at home when they start saying, Mom, my leg hurts? What, well, what do we say, right? Rise. We put ice on it. There's the little nut word we use to define that. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Rice?
Yes, thank you very much. Rice.
Now it's Prince, I think.
Oh,
Changed
yeah.
it or whatever.
I just say forget all that. Here's what you need to do.
Okay.
Elevate ice and then complain a lot. No.
Yeah, there you go. Why?
If you're an adult, never mind. I won't go there.
Oh, never mind.
We're not going to go there. So moms and dads ask the questions and test the communication system. Are you using texting? Can I text you? Do you use Instagram? I mean, because nowadays doctors are using Instagram now to send film to each other. And I found that out the other day when I was talking to a colleague that was here from California. He goes, I went, Instagram, really? Yeah, well, it's a special file, it's a business account, blah, blah, blah. I go, is it just for California?
Yeah.
It hasn't gone the country. The bottom line is this, there is so much technology that we can use it to stay connected to all the players and participants in the healing process and managing pain.
Right.
And expectations.
Oh gosh, yes.
Gosh, because that's probably one of the biggest ones that we run into with whether it's pain or other neurological syndromes. Tics come to mind because usually there's one of the things that when we start working with somebody with tics, usually it's going to get worse before it gets better. And same thing with a parent. Wait, why is my kid ticking more? This is a problem. Or why do I hurt more, doc? Why is the thing you supposed to make the pain go away?
Yep.
Why is it getting worse? Oh, well, here's why. Neuropathy is another great example. We talked about those small diameter fibers versus the bigger ones, and it's like telling people.
That's a good point, Sam, because when you, at my level, you have muscle memory is one thing, but your whole body memorizes things.
Absolutely.
So, for example, I've had both knees worked on over the years, and there are times when I'll go out and work out, and guess what? I'm reminded of that knee injury, that surgery, so our bodies remember what goes on in them over time. So as we age, we will get, I raise my hand for anybody who's not watching. As we age, we're going to have pains because of just normal, natural shrinking and compressing of the skeletal system. Muscles are different. Maybe you didn't work out as much as you could have and you should have. So cores get changed. So we're going to have pain.
Absolutely.
Or some level of that discomfort, inflammation, or the whole gambit, whatever it is. So as a youth, we don't have the same appreciation as we would for grandpa and grandma and what they're going through.
Right.
And so managing your pain for any age requires being mindful and aware of your body so that you can put it in perspective.
Right.
And that can go really well with your helping your mom and your dad and your grandpa and your grandma. If you have that appreciation as a youth, say, hey, you know what? I'm not here to help you, grandma, with go up the stairs. I'm helping you to manage our comfort level with each other. I want to be close to you so that she doesn't feel like you're babying her. Yeah. But there's pain that causes people not to be able to walk upstairs the way they want to.
Right.
Or pick up the grandkids.
Absolutely.
So my mantra is be mindful of your body and be a body awareness if you're going to manage your pain.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very 21st century perspective of it, as you kind of talked about with the, was it North Dallas?
Yeah, North Dallas 40, the movie.
Dallas
It's a
40.
movie and a book.
Yeah, and I think that kind of harkens back, I believe, to kind of what I would probably call the Bear Bryant era of football.
Yeah, that's a good reference. Vince Lombardi, that era as well.
Right, you're going to be in pain. We're going to inflict pain on you, but now the perspective is, yes, that's going to happen, but the word you keep using a lot throughout the whole discussion was that mindfulness and that body connection, and something that I think really as a society and as Americans, we don't really engage in a whole lot. There's a lot of disconnection in the body. As you talk about, even like with opioids are really good usage of that, of disconnecting the mind and the body. Right?
Well, they mask the pain.
Absolutely.
And then because of the chemical addictive behavior,
it gets worse.
Yeah, and the pain then breaks down, because it's masked, it'll break down certain body tissue and make a whole other set of problems with the chemistry. But one of the things that we're kind of talking around a little bit is helping individuals understand injury versus hurt.
Yeah.
Whether it's a coach and a player relationship or a mom and a dad with the kids, are you really hurt?
Yeah.
And that's why you're crying, or you just surprise yourself because this is the first time you've ever fallen forward.
Yeah.
And you skinned yourself. And that's I say it that way because they literally haven't had that experience to know, is this serious or not? Should I really be crying or should I not? No, great. A kid's going to be saying that through their head right now. That's what adults are for, to come in and model for them. You're okay. You're okay.
You're fine,
Here, let's put some water on it.
Throw out some dirt on it.
Yeah. But with adults, we have that preconceived notion, and we should be better at managing injury versus hurt, and that way the pain associated will be better categorized so that you can manage it effectively and maybe not do the chemistry. I mean, I can't take opioids because they make me just sick. It's just that stuff is just nasty for me. So and I've got a high pain tolerance anyway. But that has taught me that when I'm talking to an athlete, I know the signs of addiction when they've been on them too much, which is when I usually get pulled into some of these situations, is that nothing else worked. They couldn't get off of the stuff. And so when I first go in and assess players, I talk about their prevalence for taking a pill, dropping a pill. All right, so when you have a headache, here's my first test. When you have a headache, which one do you take? Baby aspirin or Tylenol?
Answer.
They go Tylenol because they don't know what baby aspirin is. So that starts the discussion. You see there's a difference in the size of the pill, right?
Right.
There's dosage, right? You understand that? So how many of those Tylenols do you take? Oh, I don't know, whatever, you know. And they look at movies.
Yeah.
The guy, you know, the movie effect of dropping a whole bunch of pills in your hand and popping in your I went, what are you doing?
I immediately think about that show, Ballers with The Rock.
Yeah.
Half the show, he's just dumping into his hand and just throwing it back.
Yeah, so it's, we are victims, so I assess how are you a victim of your environment and how has that affected you, so that I know about the pain management. Is it emotional pain management or physical pain management? And because if you have emotional pain management, that will manifest itself into a physical condition. 100%. Versus physical, the measuring stick is how much has that physical state caused the level of pain, and as the physicality goes away because the therapy's been applied, you know, the wound has healed, the stitches are out, you are walking on the leg. Those are indicators that you probably shouldn't have as much pain as you're demonstrating to me. So we also play with the camouflage of mind-body connection and what it does to your ability to manage the pain within yourself. So interesting stuff for me.
Definitely, yeah, and then it makes me think of too, you know, the complexities. Then it gets into something like, I don't know what, reflex sympathetic dystrophy or complex regional pain syndrome. You know, when they get into really crazy, far out there things like that, where it's like, well, there's no real injury, but the person is experiencing a tremendous amount of pain. So it's like, well, how do we interrupt that pattern?
Well, the first thing for me is, and look, we've got examples in this state of teenagers that, teenage athletes that have lost their lives to opioid addiction for the very reason that you just mentioned. They still perceive there's a discomfort or there's an irritation, and many times those are triggered by something social. They had a heartache, something went wrong at school, and they go to the oxycodone or whatever it might be as their relief, and yet they'll mask it as saying, well, my leg hurts. Well, your leg hurts because your girlfriend just dumped you, and you deflected into that. So there's a lot of different things that have to be considered, but the simple strategy I approach to every one of them is make sure that you're asking them where's the source of the pain, be mindful of the pain exists, and then so you're into their mindset, and then with that mindfulness, ask them how do they think about where the pain is. They're making that connection, the brain connection to the body part. So I'll actually add a player that really fractured his right arm really badly, and it was all healed. You know, had some involvement with his elbow. He says, "Gosh, you know, Coach, my arm hurts." I go, "Really?" So I grabbed his left arm, but right after he said it real quickly, and I punched his left arm. I said, "Does it hurt? Does it hurt? Does it hurt?" "Yeah, Coach, it really hurts." I said, "You know, that's your left arm." Goes, oh, and he was griping about the pain of the old injury, but it really wasn't. He wasn't cognitively positioning himself and realizing that there was real pain there. So I said, "What we just did, Gary, was we went through faking you out. I proved to you that you don't have the pain. Something else is triggered." So we have another discussion about how's your day going? What happened today in your day? What can we do differently? And so we got to the root of the problem. But the bottom line for all of that, for me, with pain management, is that the person takes responsibility for it first. They're not deflecting it to a physician or a physical therapist or a coach. They have to own it first. If they don't, they're relying on things they don't control to try to manage that pain, and usually will fall victim to some kind of chemical dependency of some sort.
Yeah, it's like, you're giving yourself, you're empowering yourself when you're taking responsibility and actually recognizing, and oftentimes something that we talk about in our office too is having, sometimes part of the healing journey is sometimes it's hard because we work with a lot of patients too with chronic complex cases. They come with autoimmune and so many different symptoms, and there's really never really truly it could be this, it could be so many reasons why they're feeling the discomfort that they're feeling. And one of the conversations that I commonly love to remind my people is, you know, it's really about, it's rather than constantly focusing on the story behind, it's also looking at what is working in your life. What is it, I see in your notes here, gratitude too. It's like, what feels good? Because when we constantly focus on what doesn't feel good, then that becomes our story, becomes your identity. And somehow, without that focus, then all of a sudden it's like you're starting to, when you start to focus on something different, that's working, that you have a freedom to build a new identity, a new story behind it. And so, yeah, it's like finding gratitude behind what you feel, and not when we take, it's something that even without, whether it's not, but it's physical or emotional pain, asking yourself what is truly happening, or what's really driving me to reach for that ice cream, or what's really driving me for binging on this Netflix for nights on. Addiction can come in so many ways, or abuse of something, of some sort of commodity. It can come in so many ways because we're trying to perhaps dampen a certain pain we're feeling, but we can't recognize it. But taking time to really recognize, taking time to maybe journal or have some sort of coach or someone that can guide you through that to help you identify those habits or patterns that you're going to, that you know that it's perhaps it's self-destructive, but being able to take responsibility and saying, what can I change now? I think that's really powerful, what you're just pointing out too.
Well, thank you for that.
Needed. Yeah.
And the other thing I want to say, because it's something we do at the beginning, is starting to get people to take responsibility for where they're at now. You're no longer a victim. Once you enter our office, you're not a victim anymore. You're taking responsibility. You're taking proactive action to change where you're at to be where you want to be. And that's a huge piece.
Yeah, and I've been doing some studying lately with Stedman Clinic out in Vail about the power of gratitude in the healing process. And too often we have these platitudes, we have sound bites and phrases and we don't really put anything really behind it. So I've been really devoting myself to, if I say something, I want to give some meaning to it. So gratitude is a word. Well, hey, let's have a gratitude moment. Let's start off the show with gratitude today. Well, that's good. I like that, and I do that.
Right.
And others that we know that do that as well.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they have purpose behind it. We know them well enough. They have some gravitas behind what they do. In the healing process, post-surgery, the gratitude is that you're sitting in this bed in pre-op and they're putting needles in you and they're doing all kinds of stuff. I never thought about sending them a note. They sent me a note thanking me about, for great to be with you and help, blah, 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 blah. And then I started getting curious about doing the research on it. And interestingly enough, there's empirical writings about the power of gratitude in promoting the healing process post-surgery, as well as maintaining your healing time frame. So you recover faster because of the mindset that you create. But it has a process. So we're creating a package for surgical patients at the Stedman Clinic where they have a gratitude pack. Basically steps they can take on their own, little cards they can send, emojis they can send, using social media to reinforce the gratitude and the gratefulness of that and power of that, to practice it. So we're going to do some, hopefully in the next 6 months, we're going to do some measuring on that and do some formal studies.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yes.
It just happened yesterday, actually. We finalized it yesterday when I was getting my session with the doc.
Yeah.
They manipulated me. God, just exams are not supposed to feel that way, but they do.
But they do.
It is what it is.
Absolutely.
So, and by the way, I'm very grateful for the opportunity, you guys. Thank you, Lynn, for reaching out to me and meeting you, Sam, formally for the first time. So
absolutely.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, how can our listeners find you? Obviously join you for the
Well,
next
in a few minutes, we're going to talk about on 360 Performance, we're going to talk about Boys and Girls Club. We're going to have the executive director on, Danielle Felder is going to be on. She's a woman of color that is here in Colorado, and the All-Star game is coming for Major League Baseball. And they have a very strong connection with Boys and Girls Club, so we're going to talk about safety and kids safety, and how we can perform in that. You can reach me, excuse me, here at the show every Friday, or 360mindset.com is my website. Just ring it up and ask me a question.
Yeah.
Great.
And you can find the shows on Spotify as well, which is where I was listening to a couple of them this morning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anchor FM, if you guys haven't done this, Anchor.fm is a free distribution platform for
Nice.
shows. So produce my show again after the fact and
That's awesome.
send it. So it's on Spotify, iCloud, Google. There's 9 different platforms they'll circulate you on for free.
Very
Oh,
cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's always good to know.
Yeah.
Great
Yes.
to know.
Well, we are super grateful for everybody tuning in today on the show, and for those listeners who tune in later after the show's recorded. Thank you so much for joining us, as always. And Sam, what is the question that we love to be able to end our show with?
Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
We'll see you in 2 weeks on Friday at 10 a.m. Take care.
Or email at info